Aloha. I'll tell you what, we're going to play a little pentatonic major and minor. I'd like you to see the difference between the two. And what fingerings we use to do this is actually going to help out in the long run because it makes it feel smooth and seamless. Remember when we play any note that's like a D note, an A note, a G note, an E note? Quite literally, we could do that with an open note, or we could play those notes at the 5th fret using a finger, depending on what it is. This all stems off of the concept of the C major scale can be played in 3 different positionings, whether it's C, D, A, E flat, B flat. Once you learn all these 3 scale fingerings, the fingers naturally want to do this in just correlation to what feels good. So I'll show those again. It's going to be a C major. If I were to play the same scale but play it up a half step and play it just wouldn't make sense because you wouldn't have that, you'd have the open notes there. However, if I were to close that gap and play those same notes, it would, but it combines a little finger movement. So what we do is we learn how to play the C major utilizing the open notes: C, open D, E, F, open G, A, open B, and C. Notice how the 3rd finger plays the C and the F notes, and then it's done. The 2nd finger is going to be playing just the E note and just the A note, and then it's done. And then the 1st finger just plays the C note. That's all it does. Those are its purposes. So if you say 3rd finger, 3rd fret, open, 2nd finger, 2nd fret, 3rd finger, 3rd fret again for the F, open, 2nd finger, 2nd fret, open, 1st finger, 1st fret, you actually get used to going G, C, E, C, D, E, F, D, E, do, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You do variations of just these notes. If it did a 5 note rather than 4 note, I would C, E, C, D, E, F, G, C, D, 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 do, 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 do. And those all would stay diatonic. The thing about chromatic scales and diatonic scales is you have to know how many notes those are in. With pentatonic scales, you quite literally have only the 5, and because when we play chords like an E major or an E minor or a G major or a G minor, we only really have 5 notes in those, which are not defined on what that is necessarily. It'll have a 3rd in there, and then the minor won't. So that's how you know the difference between a major and minor. But here's how I like to think of them. Your relative and your relative major and your relative minor share the same notes. Therefore, both of those scales, pentatonic-wise, can be used while in that key. Case in point, if we're playing something in the key of E minor and it goes to D major, you quite literally can play in the key of G major and B minor if you're doing a run over the top of that corresponding chord. So in E minor, if I was doing D major, E minor, G major. Now respectively, we could be in the key of C, and we could be playing the minor 3rd, and then we could change keys and go to a major 2nd. You could also see this as having an E minor, and then going to D as being in the key of like G, G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, F sharp. We could do E minor right after the D major, which would be the minor 6. So I would assume that doing a jig that has an E minor to a D major is going to be in the key of G. Just my assumption. Doesn't have to be, but it's a good one. So what we would do is play the E minor and utilize the E note. We would utilize the G note. We would utilize the open A. We would utilize the C. We would utilize the open D string. We would utilize the E, of course, the root. We would utilize the open G. We would use the A. We would use the open B. We would use the D, and we would use the open E, and then we would use the G. When we utilize these notes, they are all the natural notes that are found within inside the E minor scale. Just because I didn't say an F sharp in there doesn't mean that we can't play that whilst playing an E minor, but if we're going to keep it particularly E minor pentatonic, we're only going to be having the notes of an E, a G, an A, a B, a D, and then an E again. So those 5 notes, plus in the key of G major, if we had a G note, an A note, a B note, a D note, and then an E note, those are all the notes inside of G major. So we'd have G, A, B, D, E, A, a G, A, B, D, E, G. So all these notes are part of the G major scale. When you're playing anything like a run in an E minor, you can do what I do. So what I was doing there was an E minor to a D, but when I played the E minor, I would do a G major pentatonic. Starting with the G, 3rd finger on the 3rd fret, opening up by doing a quick pull off, almost as if I'm pulling off the note towards. From the G goes to an open E, then I take my 3rd finger again, or if I started with the pinky, maybe I'll use both those. It's good to try this on One Day More. It's good to try these notes with different fingers to get used to each finger having those pull-offs. It is kind of awkward going from this, but what you'll notice, and you did in the session, is when I pluck it once and then do a pull-off. There isn't a double pluck. It's just one pluck and pull off. So pluck, pull off, 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 pluck, pull off. E minor and G major together. F minor and G sharp minor together. G sharp major, A major, and F sharp minor is relative minor? Absolutely. So if you see it as having an A major here, and you could go from your top note that would be across that bar to F sharp, you would go up a minor 3rd, your pinky would be on the 5th fret. So 5th fret to 2nd fret, 5th fret to 2nd fret, 4th fret to 2nd fret, 4th fret to 2nd fret, 4th fret to 2nd fret, and then 5th fret to 2nd fret. Gives you the exact same, but up a whole step. When we do this, we can keep going exponentially and play that up a half step, and you keep modulating your tone. What's interesting when we're working through these is jazz permits me to go up a half step, do a lick, and then go back. It might not sound right, but like I could use that E minor to F major, just that half step, which is great for 2 different types of modes, either Phrygian or Lydian for me, and then I could use the pentatonic, which we've been talking about, to go to do like a So what I like to do is put together these runs of like E minor, E, F sharp, G, A, B flat, B, D, E. And what happens is these little runs become second nature. And you work on them with the first note, and then you drop that first note, and you add a note, or you drop the first 2 notes, and you add so on and so forth. When I do things in phrasings, I generally do things in phrasings of 4 notes or 3 notes, because 4 notes works with every pattern that I have, and 3 notes allows me to do triplets, triplet, which allows me to like kind of work in 3/4 and 6/4. So I guess the takeaway that we would have from here is try doing an E minor to a D jam. When you're playing the E minor here, you can also move this E minor up to get your E minor right here. Also a great way to play it looks like this, which is exactly like a D minor, D major, D minor, move the finger down for the F and cover the D again, scoot that up. That's an E minor, or up a whole step, F sharp minor. Since we know we've got a major, minor, minor, and then a major, you can see this as being a G major, and then a major. What I really like is if you were to pour out the whole chord, you would see the D major. If I scoot up here and then I make the minor right here, and then spread this out, I would quite literally see my fingers doing this kind of crazy chord, which is super hard to do. Right here, but finger down, over there. I would virtually say this is how I do it. I would play the chord that I wanted to play right here. I would put my whole finger down and bar it, and then I would use my other hand to tap, and then play. And then I would get a nice full chord. I could also put the E and the what is that? C sharp there for the whole thing if I wanted to get the whole expression of the chord, which would be, right? Has that C down in there, the E, and then works up the E, G, and the B up here with the G up top. So this minor expression, what I do is I'll have something like a D major to an E minor to a D major to an E minor, F sharp minor, D major to an E minor, D major to an E minor, F sharp minor, G. So when we do this, we could do a whole progression of. And then the last chord we kind of went over today was our diminished, which is that magical 7th chord. On guitar, it's really hard to play or really easy. Easy way, whatever you pick for your note as the root, go down a half step. When you have that root as a half step, it acts as the 7th note, which is needed to make this chord. So let's say we had an A major at the 5th fret. If I wanted to form that, I would take my A and drop down to an A flat. I would keep my 4th. I would skip the string right here and play above it, and I would put my finger right back down on top. If we were to pick something like a E major down here, we would have E major having a 3rd here. So if we wanted a diminished chord, we would need to flatten the 3rd. So the G sharp goes to a G. Since we have a B and an E right here, sorry, that was backwards, B and an E, we know that E is the root, so it stays, but our B needs to go down a half step. So when we do this, we get rid of the G sharp, becomes a G, and we scoot down the B, but I replace it with this. Notice how when we lay these notes out, we get our E diminished. That E diminished, it looks weird open, but if we were to replace our fingers, scoot up and put it down, we would get this chord that's able to be moved up the whole fretboard. So knowing this chord down here as an open phrasing, and then being able to play it up here, it leads into B my. It tends to lead to be my 7th, my resolve, my lending chord. So, hope I didn't lose you. I know this is a long video. The takeaway, try and play your G major pentatonic using the fingers that feel the most comfortable. I tend to say those are the fingers that we use for our spider exercises. The reason why we started off on the pentatonic with our pinky is because a lot of times we play our G majors using these fingers and we add this note, the D on top of there, G, A, B, C, D. When we have that D doubled up underneath the G and D there, it makes that G5 really nice. Or not G5 because we have the major 3rd in there, but it still does add a 5th in there. Okay, so being able to use the G major, E minor, D major, when we're using E minor, trying different chords that are based around the E minor. Bar chords are a little stickier than the other words. The other ones can be broken chords or they can be backward chords using a 1 minor 3rd 5. If we use that kind of concept, we can hear. You can't do it always. It has to change that 3rd for the specific chord you're trying to be over. So if we're looking at the chord structures we're doing, I can move this D major from right here, turn it into a C major, which incorporates that D major and shows me what it's spread out. I know that's a long stretch, but if I scoot up here and play that same chord, I'd have an E major. We would see that as being the major 3rd, move it back to the minor 3rd, and be able to play. What was that? I'll diagnose that one later. That's a great chord. When we're doing this, we can put this backwards, we can put it forwards, and that thusly gives us our forward and backwards motions for what a major pentatonic would be, and then its relative major or minor. A good way to explain it here would be, I guess, in the key of G major. When I go A to G, and then I go from a, an E to a D, those are 4 notes inside of the G major pentatonic. I'm only missing one more note. which is my third. So if I know that B's in there, I've got my A, my G, I've got my E, D, and my B. So we've got, well, those are the first notes of that pentatonic. They also happen to be the same notes on this open pentatonic phrasing that we're showing. Sorry. So a 5-3, 5-3, 4-2, 5-2, 5-2, 5-3 is a D major pentatonic on the outside. And then if we were to turn that and go to the 3 and go 3 open, 3 open, 2 open, 2 open, 2 open, 3 open. Those are all the notes of an E minor pentatonic. Thusly, you could do both. And then once we have this one from here, that's where we start our pentatonic, which was this one, the E minor pentatonic right here, to get a forward type of pentatonic. So between the three different positionings that correlate with our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, we can have C major pentatonic. We can use our second finger and do C major pentatonic. And then with our first finger, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 5, 1. We can also do that in the third fingering. And that requires a little switch over with our fingers we can talk about next session, but that's a lot more advanced than I think we need to go. That's for soloing. The pentatonic is the most used, I would say modern scale, because rock and roll and blues is much easier just to play with the outskirts of that. Doesn't necessarily need to be major or minor at a certain point because only the one note is the note of contention in there. Other than that, being able to see how these scales and modus fit together on the neck is really kind of interesting, like jigsaw pieces like I was talking about. So when we've got one that does something this way and then one that does something this way, I kind of see those as two concepts that have a central foundation. One does one this way and one does something that way. Once we learn how to do it in one key, it can be replicated. So if we could do this kind of like A to D to E minor to F sharp minor, we could have like a that A minor and the F sharp minor are relative. The D major, a B minor are relative, and the E minor and a G major are relative. So what's to say I can't just put a G major in place of that E minor? A, D, G, and then because I was doing A, D, E, F sharp, what's to say I can't just take that F sharp to be the first chord that I wanted and replace the D with the B minor? So it quite literally could be. Thusly, you'll be able to write different chord progressions, write different modulations and movements, different melodies. When diagnosing songs to figure out what key they're in, I'm sure your ear is wonderful, but sometimes I have an issue hearing like the extensions of chords, like hearing a 6. I don't necessarily always hear that A over the top of a C to go, oh yeah, there's my C6. I try and really hear the triad. So being able to explain what your extended chords are and then see those on the fretboard as being something tangible, finding out where your A is in the key of C, and then knowing that you could utilize that as part of your pentatonic really helps out. I hope this wasn't too over the head. If you have any questions about it, put it in the comments, or we'll talk about it next week. I will learn those jigs and reels and put those into a portfolio where at least I'll have a comparable knowledge of the songs and the chord changes, so I can just play underneath you if you ever need me. And 2, it's something great to work on. All right, aloha.